Welcome to the Holistic Success Show. I'm Elizabeth Lozano.
And I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Today we're going to have a guest helping us manage our money successfully.
We'll also be watching clips from Dr. Puff about physical suffering and how we can enjoy life regardless.
And a question from you about how to manage our anxiety well.
Our next question will be about transitioning from motherhood back into having a career. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show.
I'd like to share a story with you, a wonderful story about a wonderful man. His name was Bill, and he was my father-in-law. And after I got married, I got to really know him, and just a wonderful man that was loved by many people. He worked for a large Fortune 500 company and had worked his way up, and started off with very little and just kept working his way up, got a lot of schooling, a lot of training, kept going. And as the company got rid of, upper management, he just kept moving up and got more and more responsibility until when he reached close to retirement age, he was given so much responsibility, it truly was wearing him out and exhausting him. So finally, he retired, and he moved to a place to live with his mother-in-law, and because they were close and cared for each other. And about a year later, he was diagnosed with cancer, and it wasn't a fast cancer; it was a slow cancer. So he ended up going through a lot of treatments. Spent 4 years of trying to fight it, and he did fight it, and then he passed, and that was several years ago. And what's important in this story is not that he's passed, because many people out there have people that they love that have passed, but what's important about this story is my father-in-law, Bill, he described the last 4 years of his life when he was struggling with pain, going through treatment, and all the things that come along with cancer. As many of you know, most of us don't get away from that disease. Sooner or later we meet someone who has that. He had a lot of suffering, physical suffering that he had to go through, and he had just reached retirement, was looking forward to years and years of traveling and spending time with his wife and his kids and his grandchildren, and then he was diagnosed with cancer, and 4 years later he passed. And yet he described those last 4 years of his life, I heard him say it many times, that they were the best years of his life. How was that possible? Well, what he did is, even though he was physically struggling with things that had to do with the cancer, and sometimes he was in the emergency room many, many times, and going through chemotherapy and treatments, which were physically painful for him, that wasn't what his life was about. He decided, well, if I don't know how long I'm going to live, I'm going to live really well. So what he did is he just really got into his family and his grandchildren and really spent an enormous amount of time loving them, spending time with them, getting to know them better. And when he was getting close to dying, his whole family rallied around him, and my wife had the privilege of being there when he passed. And he was just a very beautiful human being who passed wonderfully. And though he's missed, and by many people still, even though it's been many years, he went through that phase of living with cancer and then dying with cancer, and yet saw that as the best years of his life. And he was a very honest man, so it wasn't like he was just saying, well, this is the best because this is all I have left. He truly saw it as the best years of his life, because before that he had raised his family. He came from a difficult childhood, and he had raised his family, and because he didn't have much education, he was going to school while he was raising his family, so he was very busy. And then when he got older, his company kept getting rid of people, so his work got busier and busier and busier. So he never really had time just to enjoy life. So when he got cancer, retired and got cancer, he really started realizing what was important to him. It was his family and being with them. And he spent a ton of time with his family, and they got to spend a lot of time with him. And it was a beautiful existence, because he found, even in suffering, he was able to find peace, find joy of living. And if he could find that, no matter what you are going through or what any of us end up going through later in our lives, we too can find that, Because in science, there's a rule that if one person on the planet can do it, that means anyone can do it. We may not all do it, but it's a possibility. So in the next episode, a little bit, I'll talk more about how we can do it. But just know that Bill lived very well, even though he was suffering, even though he was dying. Peace.
Our first question comes to us from Bob P. in Sioux City, Iowa, and he writes in, I'm starting to get anxious around people, and I know it can get worse. I don't want to get to the point where I can't leave my house. Any suggestions?
Hi, Bob. It really is a good question because a lot of people around the world struggle with anxiety, which is caused by stress. So a lot of what happens is, though, when we start feeling stress, we start kind of creating a story with that, and that's more the anxiety part of it. The anxiety is more in your head. What's happening in here that cause you to worry? And as you worry, saying, well, is this going to get worse? I know people that get housebound and people that can never function anymore. Am I going to get that bad? And that thinking is actually what will cause you more stress. It's like when you worry about something, the worry gets worse. So the first thing is to acknowledge, okay, I may be feeling stress, and I can do things to alleviate that stress, but I'm not going to create a story with this stress. I think that's one of the greatest things you can do. Acknowledge that, be aware of that, then work towards alleviating the stress. I love exercise as one way to alleviate stress. When you're feeling anxious, go for a walk, go to the gym, do something physical to dissipate that stress. And the second thing that I really love is meditation. Meditation is a fabulous way to alleviate stress. So if you start meditating on a regular basis, I think you'll just find it fighting against all that stress and anxiety and really making your body feel better.
You know, Bob, I think it's really, really great that you're asking us this question because we live in a society that is so quick to try and cover up what's going on. We have so many medications to deal with anxiety, but they don't really deal with anxiety. They just mask the symptoms. And so basically that anxiety is trying to tell you something. Something is going wrong within you. Something's going on there, and you need to pay attention to it. Sometimes it's really hard to get in touch with what's going on, and you may need a little bit of assistance, perhaps going to therapy so you can kind of look within to really find out what's going on. You'd be surprised. We've got stuff in our subconscious that we aren't even aware of, and it's really helpful in therapy sometimes. It's somebody that can help pull that stuff out of you. So get in touch with what's going on. Get in touch with why you're feeling that way in the first place, and find positive ways to deal with that before it gets bad. And like I said, I'm really glad that you're asking this question now and that you're watching this show, because it means that you're really trying to find healthy ways to deal with things. Listen to our podcast. We've got the podcast Meditation for Health, and we've also got the CD that you can listen to, Meditation for Health and Happiness, to help you on your journey. So thank you so much for your question. It's a really, really great one.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. It really is, and good luck to you.
I'd like to welcome Curtis Hill to the show. He is a certified financial planner and author of the book Poor No More, Wealth is Within Reach. So thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Delighted to be here.
Great. So why don't you tell us about this book that you wrote and how one gets to be poor no more?
Well, it's all about your relationship with money. It's unlearning some of the things that maybe society and Madison Avenue has taught you, and instead learning how to think for yourself and how you can get ahead by maybe doing things a little different than how most people do things and how most people automatically spend their money and are influenced by outside forces that are really trying to separate you from your money.
So such as, trying to keep up with the Joneses type deal?
Well, exactly. There's a lot of people who buy things just for status, and the status that they're actually buying is poverty, because they get so much into some status symbols that they really can't afford, that they end up on a long-term basis being much poorer and showing much less status.
So what are some basic tips that you can give our viewers for managing money?
Well, to begin with, start by not going to all your poor friends for your advice. Maybe you should start talking to people who have money, or taking some time to read some material like my book, Poor No More, Wealth is Within Reach, to learn some basics about finances, because unfortunately our educational system is really lacking in education on finance. And in fact, in many families and in our society as a whole, sometimes it's considered almost rude to talk about money. So people get a lot of bad ideas and they don't have anything to counter those bad ideas. So that's why I wrote my book, is to trying to turn that around and to get people to take a fresh look at how they view their money and find a way that they can change their relationship with money, because it really is a relationship. And the whole goal is not to become wealthy so much, but to become what I call financial serenity, I think, should be the goal. Financially successful, maybe you don't need that. You just need serenity so you don't feel that money is your enemy. And this is what this is all about.
I like that a lot. Those are some wonderful things to work
Thank you.
towards. So also, in your book, and on your website too, you talk about managing debt. So what are some advice you can give? Because you talked about with school and how it doesn't cover that a lot of the whole debt management. And if you've gone to school, a lot of times there's this whole student loan that you have afterwards. So what kind of advice can you give for people who are struggling with debt, be it from student loans or credit cards or whatever other thing they've got going on?
Well, first, you need to think about changing your whole concept of debt. Debt is really a four-letter word, and that's why I want to focus for people. If there's something you can't afford, why do you think it's more affordable if you buy it on time through a credit card, where you not only pay for the item once, but you pay for it 2 or 3 times when you add all the interest on top of it? But somehow or the other, Madison Avenue and all the advertising executives have convinced us we need a lot of things we really don't need, that doesn't really add to our quality of life. But it's okay to buy them anyhow because we can just make easy payments. And whenever you think in the terms of easy payments, automatically know you're going down the wrong path. There is no such thing, and don't do that. Also, my book talks a lot about debt and how you can get out of it and how you can manage it. And it also talks about good forms of debt, because sometimes debt is a good thing when you're buying an appreciating asset. But buying a depreciating asset using debt is a very, very negative thing.
So can you give us some examples of things that appreciate versus things that depreciate?
Well, things where you may want to use debt on appreciating items might be, not counting the last 24 months, might be your home, or other rental property, or investments that bring you more money, that are generating money for you, for your business. Things where debt is a very negative thing are depreciating assets like a car, your clothing, things like, your stereo system. These things you should not buy on debt, because buying depreciating assets on debt, there's no really reason to do that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So something like a person's education would be something that would appreciate,
Exactly.
right?
Spending money, if you have to go into debt to do something that brings you more revenue, here's where debt makes sense.
Okay,
But the bottom line is learn how to manage your debt, learn how to reduce the cost of debt by managing your credit score is another big thing.
Okay, and how does somebody do that?
There's all kinds of ways to improve your credit score, and I talk about them a great deal in my book. And some of them you can dramatically increase your credit score in a matter of only a few weeks. Wow. By doing the proper steps. And my chapter on managing credit, which you can look at some of that on my website, will tell you more about that. The whole goal to everything, though, is to learn how to spend money, get the things that you want to get without spending too much money. Cutting back does not mean that you reduce your lifestyle. In fact, it may very well mean that you improve your lifestyle and are able to buy a lot more because you do it in a wiser way. And that's what this is about. It's about living a more comfortable life, achieving more comfort and more financial serenity. It's not just about making money, because making money and just money and towards the money doesn't bring happiness. It's about financial serenity and developing a relationship with money that is a happy relationship, not a negative relationship or something that's holding you back.
Okay, very, very good points. I think important ones. What are some changes that our viewers could start to make today to change their life?
Go through and do a budget. And understand a budget is not something there to limit you. You may think of a budget as a limiting thing from what you have in your office or in your work environment, but a budget actually may be a thing to enlighten you to how you spend your money in ways that you can improve your life while spending less money. And if you do it right, it's just a tool, it's a knowledge. Management 101 says you can't get ahead in anything until you measure it. So measuring how you spend your money is a great way to learn and how you can better control your spending and turn things around to build wealth and happiness in your life.
Well, thank you so much. And to learn more about this, or to learn more about Curtis Hill and all the wonderful tips he's got even on his website, where can we find that in your book?
You can go to pournomorebook.com. That's pour, P-O-R, no, N-O, more, M-O-R-E, book, B-O-O-K.com.
Thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thank you very much for having me, Elizabeth.
How do we do it? If right now, as you're watching this show, you are physically suffering, how do you have physical suffering and still find happiness and joy now? Both and. How can they both be there? And the first thing you want to do is whatever is wrong with your body, you want to proactively do something to fix it if you can. You go to the medical doctor, you go to the chiropractor, you get a massage, you go for a walk, you take a nice long hot bath. The various things that you can do to take care of your body, things that are healthy for you. I really do believe in doing things that don't cause addictive qualities to them, like drugs that can become addictive, or alcohol that can become addictive. Stay away from those and find more natural, more healthy ways of being well and not suffering. But when you truly are suffering, there's only so much you can alleviate, and it's not going to dissipate. Like in my father-in-law's case, Bill, when he was going through the chemotherapy, when his cancer was bad, he suffered greatly. So how can you suffer and still live? And a lot of it is by realizing that if I take my attention off of the suffering and focus it somewhere else, that suffering alleviates. For example, even right now as you're watching the show, if you have a headache or if something's wrong, I think you'll find even by watching the show and watching me speak right now, you probably will feel not as bad inside. Your body won't hurt as much until you start thinking about that pain. So distracting from that is really an essential key of helping you alleviate that pain. So whatever is happening in your life, say, I can completely focus on the pain, or I can focus on other things, like my father-in-law who focused on his children and his grandchildren. That really helped him to diminish the pain. And even though the pain was there, the physical suffering was there, there wasn't the mental suffering, which causes so much more suffering. And the best example I can give of that as a way to alleviate the pain is think about women that give birth to children. Of course, I haven't, but I do know that it's one of the most painful experiences any human being can go through. Yet women around the world are regularly willing to do that so they can have this beautiful child of theirs. And they're taught to, when they're going through the birth pains, of breathing deeply, which is always a wonderful way of alleviating pain. And then when the baby is born, even though their body may still be in great pain, that joy of having that child there really does take away from the pain. So when you are struggling, if you give attention, complete attention to that suffering, you will suffer more. Instead, if you say, I know my body hurts right now, I know I'm in pain, but there are many other things I could be attentive to, be attentive to those things. And what you may find, and I'm hoping that you will find, is that the suffering will dissipate, it will get better, and you will find the joy of living with the suffering. Truly, joy of living with suffering. They can both be there. Your life doesn't have to be over just because you're suffering, but avoid creating that story which causes so much of the suffering. Physical is painful, but the mental is much harder. And a saying I like, which I think has so much truth to it, is you can handle anything one moment at a time. So no matter how badly it gets inside, if you realize this too will pass and all you have to do is get through this next minute, you can get through almost anything. You can actually get through anything. So breathe deeply, be attentive to all the beautiful things in your life, and I think you'll find even with the suffering, no matter how horrible it is, you too can find peace and happiness in the here and right now. Peace.
This week's second question comes to us from Sylvia M. in Edinburgh, Scotland. I've been a stay-at-home mom and my youngest is now starting school. How do I find my purpose in my professional career again?
excellent question. And I think a lot of women out there right now, and men, stay-at-home moms and dads both, are discovering, what do I need to do with my life now that I've transitioned from parenthood into sort of adulthood or the work world? I mean, they both matter. They're both very important. But as you go through that transition, what you don't want to do is prematurely just get a job. I think that would be unhealthy. You won't be happy with what you do. But goals help us really move in the direction that we're headed. When we have goals, clear goals, specific goals, we then end up somewhere wonderful and great. So your goal right now is actually not to say, I'm going to do this. Your goal right now is to say, what am I going to do? I'm going to find out what my purpose in life is. So spend time right now exploring a myriad of options, look into this job, that career, this education, and this a plethora of things that you could do to go into, and then talk to people about what they're doing and say, is this something I still want to do, or is it time for me to try something else? Maybe I've been trained in this, but I'm ready for a different transition. And I think if you make it your mission, your goal, to find what you want to do, not prematurely, but really spend a week, a month, perhaps even a year or two, really exploring what you want to do, you're going to be excited about it, be passionate about it, and really make a difference in your life and the people around you.
Yeah, and don't get stuck thinking that you have to do what you were doing before. Maybe you had kids and were a stay-at-home mom. I think it's important. Take this as an opportunity for you to learn and grow. And the best thing is that you can be a wonderful role model for your child. You can show them that the world is, their oyster. They can do just about anything in life. It doesn't matter how old you are. I can remember being in graduate school and there was people that were in their 60s and maybe even in their 70s that were going back to school. So it's never too late. And by showing your child this and showing that you believe in yourself, that will actually help them in their life. So take this opportunity to develop who you are, be passionate about the things that you do. And if you're feeling kind of like, oh, and you're dragging, just remember that's going to affect not only you, it's going to affect your relationship with your husband or your partner, and ultimately your children.
Yeah, we really wish you well, because you are going to be a great example for your children. And I believe if you find your mission, you can really make a difference in our planet and our world.
And remember not to make work your number one priority, because that will affect you and your kids too. Thank you so much. This week's quote is by Wynne Borden, and the quote is, if you wait to do everything until you're sure it's right, you'll probably never do much of anything. And I think that's really some words of wisdom, because there's so many times that we wait for, I have to wait till the perfect time before I do this, before I have kids, before I have, before I get married, and then before you know, guess what? You're 80 years old and you haven't done any of the above, or I'll go to school, or I'll do all these things. So, it is important to plan, and it is important to take into account all that's going on in your life, but for a lot of things, it's never really the perfect time. So take chances and get out there and believe in yourself. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Holistic Success Show. And if you'd like to learn more about meditation, please visit our Meditation for Health podcast, which is available on iTunes and our website.
And if you have a company who would like to be part of this show by helping people around the world, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.